Good evening, everybody. I chose my project for the author project to talk to you more about Lucy Maud Montgomery, otherwise known as L.M. Montgomery. She was born November 30th, 1874, in what is now, which is called, located in Prince Edward Island in Canada. Everybody knows her for her famous story series, Anne of Green Gables, which she published in 1908. Some of the things that I learned about L.M. Montgomery, which I was surprised to learn, was how tragic her life was in reality compared to the stories that she wrote. She was a very gifted author from a little age on, where was the only child of Hugh John and Clara Montgomery. Tragically, Clara Montgomery would develop tuberculosis and die 2 years later. Back in those times, men were not allowed to raise their children, especially daughters, by themselves as widowers or single parents. So he had her go live with her maternal grandparents, and I believe it's pronounced Kadavish, Canada, which is again located in the province of Prince Edward Island. She would spend many times at her maternal aunt's home, and that actually was nicknamed Silverbush in her journals and her letters, and it was the background for Martha and Matthew Cuthbert in the Anne of Green Gables series. And Prince Edward Island, the people of Prince Edward Island are very proud of L.M. Montgomery and the contributions she created for the children's story world. And they still have her aunt's childhood home, and you can go there and have tours. And it speaks to the amount of influence that L.M. Montgomery has had, not just with the people of Canada, the people of the United States, but all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of people come every year to tour Prince Edward Island to see where L.M. Montgomery grew up, and of the home place that she spoke so well of. All but one of her 20 novels are based on Prince Edward Island. She wrote hundreds of short stories and poems. And if you go to the L.M. Montgomery Historical Society website, which is published and maintained and kept by the people of Prince Edward Island, you can see a full list of what she published. And I believe you can actually, if you go to Prince Edward Island Historical Society, you can actually read some of those. Lucy was a devout journalist. She kept journals from the time she was a little girl to the day she died. She died in April of 1942. Her husband, Edward MacDonald, would die, if I remember right, 2 years later. She was very gifted. She was very bright. She would spend 1 year of her high school year with her father in Saskatchewan and his wife, but for whatever odd reason, she never moved back with her father for good. I don't know why. There's nothing I've been able to find out about that. I personally think it's odd because as a parent, I would want my kids with me, but who knows for back then. She completed, to talk about how bright she was, she completed a 2-year teaching program in 1 year's time and graduated with honors. She did not like teaching, but back then you were either married or you taught. Something completely different than our way of life. But she said she did the teaching because it gave her time to write, and that was her passion. I'm told from what I've read that she was very promiscuous. That's not what we think of promiscuous now. Now we think, sleeps around, that kind of thing. She didn't. She dated a lot, which was unheard of back then. As soon as the gentleman in her life would start to get very serious about her and would propose marriage, she broke it off. There is one gentleman by the name of Henry that she fell madly in love with and wanted to marry, but her family said, nope, not good enough. She broke up with him and would find out a year later that he died from the Spanish influenza outbreak of 1917. I believe in one of the Anne of Green Gables series books, forgive me, I don't remember which one it is, but Gilbert gets the Spanish flu. I believe that has to do with her feelings and her way of dealing with Henry's death. At one point, she was engaged to her cousin. She broke it off. And then secretly in 1906, she was engaged to Reverend Edward MacDonald. After her grandmother died, they got married. It was not a happy marriage. It was a marriage of basically convenience. Yes, he was a reverend, but they didn't have the same ideals. They didn't have the same book desires, passion. I'm not exactly sure what she saw in him, quite frankly. Nothing seemed to speak of what they had in common and why they got married. She would have 3 sons. The middle boy died. His name was Hugh. He died in 1914. But her other 2 children would survive. Her husband, the Reverend MacDonald, at one point towards the end of their life, had a mental breakdown. And the congregation where they were at, they were asked to leave because of that. And they would eventually end up in Toronto, Canada, and that would be her final home. In 1939, she would make her last visit to Prince Edward Island. And then in 1942, she passed away. In 1935, she was awarded the Order of the British Empire by King George V. And she was also inducted into the Literary and Art Institute in France. They didn't have a lot of the award system, kind of like what we have now. So back then, those were the highest honors. One thing I found that was really interesting is that in 1927, she gave Prince of Wales at the time the book Emily's Quest, which I thought was kind of cool, considering, it's royalty. And in 1920, she would begin an 8-year battle that she won against her former publisher, who was illegally selling her books to other people. He sold Anne of Avonlea or Anne of Green Gables to a U.S. film producer, and thinking that would stop her from continuing litigation. It didn't. She was very spunky. She hired a U.S. attorney and continued the legal battle, which, again, she won. The publisher was promised to pay her 19 cents on the dollar for back then on the sale of books. She was only getting 7 cents. In 1899, she made $96.50 for the year, which for a single woman was pretty good back then. And in 1935, she was getting rich. She made $500 a year that year, which I find kind of comical, because that's not a lot of money, but you got to think of the time and the money. I learned a lot about her, and Prince Edward Island is still on my bucket list to see. I'll be honest, I'm one of those fans that I would love to go and see her home. Her books gave me a lot of comfort when I was growing up, and I loved her stories. And it just breaks my heart to know that she had such a melancholy life compared to the stories that she wrote. And to know that she was such a talented author, even from starting at the age of 17 when she had her first poem published in the Patriot paper, is amazing. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my project and you enjoy the handout. Thank you.